The studio lights burned hot and unforgiving on the television set, casting sharp shadows across the stage where Alex Jones sat across from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The producers had designed the space to maximize confrontation. 2 chairs facing each other directly, no desk, no buffer, just raw exposure. What was meant to be a standard political debate was already charged with intensity that promised something unforgettable, and what unfolded would soon be remembered as one of the most explosive moments in broadcast history. Alex Jones, with his familiar air of dominance and that trademark smirk, had walked into the studio expecting to crush yet another opponent with his bombastic style, his booming voice, and his aggressive tactics. For decades, he had built an empire by overwhelming opponents with rapid-fire accusations, emotional outbursts, and a storm of conspiracy theories impossible to fact-check in real time. His fans adored his fiery red-face rants, and his millions in revenue came not only from his broadcasts, but also from his sprawling network of supplements, merchandise, and premium content, a machine that turned paranoia into profit. But Jasmine Crockett was not like the politicians he had defeated before. At just 42, she was already regarded as one of the fiercest debaters in Congress. A former civil rights attorney, she had spent years facing down powerful men who believed intimidation could silence her. She had built her career on preparation, logic, and evidence, precisely the qualities Jones's theatrics could not overpower. What Jones didn't know was that Crockett had spent weeks preparing for this moment, meticulously collecting documents, cross-referencing his claims, and organizing airtight rebuttals designed to dismantle his credibility in front of millions. For her, this was not just about scoring political points. It was personal. Her constituents had suffered harassment and threats because of Jones's lies. Elderly voters had lived in fear. Parents had been forced to move their children to new schools after being targeted by his followers, and ordinary people had seen their lives upended by the ripple effects of his broadcasts. For Crockett, this wasn't political theater, it was justice. When the cameras went live, the host introduced a debate as though it were another evening of spectacle. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones versus Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. But the atmosphere was far from ordinary. Even the camera operators seemed to know they were about to capture something historic. Jones leaned forward, smirk widening, and began in his usual fashion, loud, aggressive, and dripping with derision. He accused Crockett and her party of spreading the real conspiracies, pacing like a caged animal as he waved his arms theatrically to fire up his supporters in the audience. His booming voice filled the studio. His anger sharpened into performance. It was a routine he had perfected, a performance that made him wealthy and influential. Crockett, however, sat quietly, calm as stone, watching the way a seasoned attorney observes a witness already about to unravel. She jotted notes on her pad, her hand resting on the neatly placed manila folder beside her. When Jones finally paused, she cut through his noise with sharp, steady voice. "Are you finished with your opening statement, Mr. Jones?" The formality, the precision, and the authority in her tone rattled him more than any shouted insult could. His response dripped with condescension, calling her sweetheart, mocking her title, but Crockett's composure never wavered. "Mr. Jones," she replied, raising an eyebrow, "I'm a sitting member of Congress and a practicing attorney. I think we can maintain professional courtesy here." Then she opened the folder. The energy in the studio shifted instantly. Silence spread as Crockett pulled out the first stack of documents, color-coded and highlighted. She explained calmly that she had evidence of 17 specific claims Jones had made in the past 2 years. Claims repeatedly debunked, claims that harmed real people, claims Jones had known were false when he made them. She revealed financial records, internal communications, and testimony from his own staff, proving he had deliberately misled his audience for profit. The words landed like hammer blows. For the first time, Jones's confidence cracked. His voice faltered, his protests grew shrill. "That's false. You can't just make accusations without proof." But Crockett only smiled faintly, sliding out another stack of papers. "Oh, Mr. Jones, I would never make accusations without proof. That's the difference between us." The fatal moment came when she referenced his most infamous conspiracy, the one where he claimed an elementary school shooting was a hoax. Holding up the evidence, Crockett looked him squarely in the eye and spoke with gravity that silenced even the rowdiest supporters in the room. She laid out how his lies had tormented grieving families, how children had been harassed, how communities had lived in fear. Suddenly, Jones's shouting seemed small, theatrical, pathetic against the weight of documented truth. He tried to frame it as a setup, a trap by the establishment, but the words rang hollow. His usual performance had no power against evidence presented with calm authority. This was more than a debate. It was a collision of two Americas, one built on conspiracy, chaos, and monetized outrage, and another fighting to restore reason, evidence, and accountability. Millions of viewers at home watched with bated breath. Parents hoping for justice, teachers hoping for truth, law enforcement hoping for sanity, and ordinary citizens longing for a return to a politics grounded in facts. What Crockett did that night was not just win a debate. She exposed a machinery of lies that had poisoned the nation for decades, dismantling Alex Jones in front of the very audience that once believed he was untouchable. The audience quickly realized that Jasmine Crockett wasn't ambushing Alex Jones at all. She was dismantling him with the steady precision of a seasoned trial attorney presenting evidence before a jury. Her calm, professional tone stood in sharp contrast to Jones's increasingly frantic attempts to wrestle back control of the debate. The cameras caught every detail of the unfolding drama. Beads of sweat forming on Jones's forehead, his restless fidgeting, his darting glances around the studio as though searching for an escape. Meanwhile, Crockett remained poised, her posture upright, her documents neatly arranged, her voice firm but controlled. "Mr. Jones," she said evenly, cutting through his bluster, "these aren't out-of-context documents. These are your words, your communications, your financial records. They tell a very clear story about a man who built a profitable business on the suffering of innocent families. The escalation had reached its peak. Jones's trademark swagger was cracking before millions of viewers. His face flushed red, his tone grew shriller, and his hand hovered nervously over his phone as though waiting for his team to intervene. Even the supporters in the audience shifted uneasily in their seats. They had come expecting to see their hero dominate, but instead they were witnessing a slow, methodical demolition. Crockett, fully in control, paced her revelations like a master litigator, saving the heaviest blows for the exact right moment. Then came the turning point. "Let's start with the facts, Mr. Jones," she said, holding up the first document for the cameras. "This is an internal email from your production staff, written just 3 months after the elementary school tragedy. It discusses how to maintain audience engagement with the story, even though the official narrative appears to be accurate." Jones's eyes widened in alarm as he recognized the document. "Where did you get that? That's private. That's illegal," he stammered. Crockett didn't flinch. "Actually, Mr. Jones, this was obtained through the discovery process in the civil lawsuits against you. All perfectly legal." She then read aloud from the email. "Alex knows the families are real, but the audience doesn't want to hear that. We need to keep the conspiracy angle going for ratings." The reaction in the studio was immediate and explosive. Gasps filled the air. People in the front row covered their mouths in disbelief. Even Jones's most loyal supporters were shaken by the undeniable evidence that their champion had knowingly lied. Crockett pressed forward, unfazed by his sputtering denials. She produced another document, financial records this time, and read aloud. "Your supplement sales increased by 340% during the months you promoted this conspiracy. Donations rose by 280%. In total, you made over $1.2 million in profit directly from spreading lies about murdered children." The numbers hit the audience like a thunderclap. The moral weight of what Jones had done was staggering. Sweat now poured down his temples as Jones struggled to regroup. That's coincidence," he barked. "People support me because they want the truth." But Crockett's voice sharpened for the first time, her anger breaking through her restraint. "Mr. Jones," she said, holding up yet another document, "here's an email from your staff instructing how to respond when your audience started asking for evidence. Quote, when people ask for evidence, redirect to emotional arguments about government overreach. Don't engage with specific factual claims because they don't support our narrative." The audience was stunned into silence, the realization sinking in that Jones's entire operation had been engineered to avoid the truth. But Crockett had saved the most devastating evidence for last. "Mr. Jones," she said, her tone now grave. "Do you recall a conversation with your head researcher about these families?" Jones's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Crockett pulled out one final document, a transcript of a recorded call. She began reading aloud. "Jones, I know the families are real, but we've gone too far to back down now. If we admit we were wrong, our whole credibility is shot." "Researcher? But Alex, some of these families are getting death threats from our audience." "Jones, that's not our responsibility. Our job is to ask questions, not manage how people react." The studio erupted in shock. The moral implications of the transcript were overwhelming. Jones had not only known the truth, he had deliberately ignored it, prioritizing profit over the safety of grieving families. Red face and veins bulging, Jones exploded, screaming about illegal recordings and globalist setups. But his tirade rang hollow. Compared to Crockett's calm, documented evidence, his fury sounded like desperation. "Mr. Jones," Crockett said firmly, her voice carrying the full authority of her legal training, "this recording was provided voluntarily by your own employee, someone who could no longer bear to be part of an operation that was tormenting innocent families. This evidence was submitted legally through the civil attorneys representing those families." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air before delivering the most piercing question of the night. "So, let me ask you directly. Knowing what you know now, knowing that real families lost real children, knowing your lies led to harassment and threats against grieving parents, do you have anything to say to those families?" The moment hung heavy. Jones had a choice: apologize and salvage some shred of dignity, or double down. He chose the latter. "I'm not apologizing for asking questions," he roared. "That's what journalists do. If people can't handle questions, maybe they're hiding something." His voice thundered across the studio, but the audience recoiled. Against Crockett's steady stream of evidence, his outburst looked pitiful, an unraveling man exposed before the world. Crockett watched with quiet certainty, like an attorney watching a guilty defendant self-destruct on the stand. Her closing words cut sharper than any shouted accusation. "Mr. Jones, you're not a journalist. You're a businessman who discovered that fear and anger are profitable commodities. You build an empire on the suffering of others, and when confronted with the truth, your response is to shout louder and blame everyone else." Then she gathered her documents, turned her gaze directly into the camera, and spoke not just to Jones, but to America itself. America deserves better than this. We deserve media personalities who respect the truth, who take responsibility for their mistakes, and who put the welfare of innocent people above their own profit margins. Jones was still shouting, but the damage was done. His credibility lay in ruins, destroyed by his own words and his own reaction to being confronted with the truth. The host tried to regain control of the program, but it was clear that something unprecedented had just happened. A conspiracy theorist had been completely exposed and dismantled on live television using nothing but documented evidence and professional legal technique. The immediate aftermath of Crockett's systematic destruction of Alex Jones was unlike anything seen in modern political media. Within minutes of the debate ending, social media platforms exploded with reaction videos, memes, and commentary from across the political spectrum. Before Jones had even left the studio, clips of his meltdown were already going viral. The hashtag Crockett Destroys Jones began trending nationally within 30 minutes, gaining over 100,000 posts in the first hour alone. The most shared clip was a 30-second compilation showing Crockett calmly reading from Jones's own internal communications while he screamed and gesticulated frantically in the background. The visual contrast was devastating. A composed professional presenting evidence against a grown man throwing a tantrum. Tweets and posts poured in, with one viral tweet garnering over 200,000 likes stating, "Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass on how to handle conspiracy theorists. She didn't shout, didn't interrupt, just presented facts." This is what happens when you bring a lawyer's preparation to a propagandist's temper tantrum. Memes flooded the internet. One image showed Crockett with a stack of documents labeled facts, facing Jones with a megaphone labeled feelings. Another depicted Jones screaming with the caption, "When you realize your own emails expose your lies." The financial implications for Jones were immediate and severe. Within hours, major sponsors began pulling advertisements from his platform, 3 payment processors announced they were reviewing their relationships with his business, and his supplement sales, his main revenue stream, plummeted by more than 60% within the first week. Politically, the reactions were swift and largely divided along party lines, though Crockett's performance had surprising crossover appeal. Democratic leaders praised her methodical approach to debunking conspiracy theories, tweeting, "This is how you counter misinformation," not with shouting matches, but with documented evidence and professional presentation. Even some Republicans acknowledged her effectiveness, framing it as a defense of truth over conspiracy rather than partisanship. One moderate Republican senator wrote, "Regardless of party, we should all agree that profiting from the pain of grieving families is wrong." Congresswoman Crockett presented her case professionally and effectively. Conservative media figures, however, were split. Some defended Jones, claiming the debate was a setup or that Crockett had used unfair tactics, while others distanced themselves, recognizing that his meltdown had made him a liability. A prominent conservative commentator admitted, "I've disagreed with Congresswoman Crockett on policy, but you have to respect how thoroughly she prepared. She brought receipts, and Jones brought screaming." Most significantly, Crockett's presentation of Jones's internal communications carried major legal consequences. Legal experts noted that his on-air meltdown, especially his denials followed by the admission that he asks questions rather than reporting facts, could be used against him in civil court. When a defendant has a public meltdown in response to evidence being presented, that's rarely helpful to his legal position, explained one civil litigation attorney. The families pursuing civil action against Jones issued a joint statement praising Crockett. "Congresswoman Crockett showed the nation what we've been saying in court for years. Alex Jones knew he was lying, profited from those lies, and showed no remorse for the harm he caused our families." Several new lawsuits were filed in the weeks after the debate, citing Jones's own words during the confrontation as evidence of his intent and state of mind. Beyond politics and law, the debate became a cultural milestone in the fight against misinformation. Educational institutions began incorporating clips into media literacy courses, with professors noting how Crockett had clearly demonstrated the difference between documented fact and manipulative opinion. Psychology professors analyzed the event as a case study in how conspiracy theorists respond when confronted with irrefutable evidence, contrasting Crockett's measured professionalism with Jones's irrational denials. Journalism schools added her approach as a model of effective investigative presentation. Meanwhile, the debate also reignited public conversations about the responsibility of media platforms to curb harmful conspiracy content. Tech executives faced growing scrutiny over algorithms that had amplified Jones's falsehoods, and Congress scheduled hearings to examine social media's role in spreading misinformation. Several platforms even announced new policies designed specifically to prevent the type of profitable deception Jones had built his empire on in the aftermath of the debate. Advertising standards organizations began creating new guidelines to prevent legitimate businesses from inadvertently funding harmful misinformation through programmatic advertising, much of which had been pioneered by Jones. Struggling to recover from his devastating loss of credibility, Jones tried several strategies. First, he claimed the entire debate was a setup orchestrated by political enemies, but this quickly fell apart once it became clear that all the evidence presented by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was already part of the public record through legal proceedings. Next, he attempted to attack Crockett personally by questioning her motives and credentials, though this strategy only reminded the public of his unprofessional behavior during the debate. Finally, Jones tried to frame the confrontation as proof of a broader conspiracy against independent media. However, his own recorded words, where he admitted to knowingly lying, made it impossible for that narrative to hold. As the weeks passed, Jones's audience numbers declined steadily. Many former supporters began expressing disillusionment not only with his lies, but with his refusal to take responsibility when confronted with evidence. Online forums once loyal to him started turning critical, as longtime followers questioned everything they had believed. One viral social media post captured the mood. "I supported Alex for years because I thought he was fighting for truth. But watching him scream at Congresswoman Crockett instead of addressing the evidence she presented, that's not what truth seekers do. That's what guilty people do when they're caught." The post garnered over 50,000 likes and symbolized a larger shift among his base, For Crockett, however, the debate was a defining victory. Her calm and factual approach raised her national profile, establishing her as a leading figure in the fight against misinformation. Invitations poured in from law schools asking her to speak on effective advocacy, while media outlets sought her insights on countering conspiracy theories with evidence-based arguments. Most importantly, her performance became a model for other politicians facing similar confrontations. As one political strategist explained, Congresswoman Crockett showed us that you don't fight lies with louder lies. You fight them with documented truth presented professionally and systematically. While her office reported a dramatic rise in speaking requests and media appearances, Crockett remained careful to use her platform to promote evidence-based political discourse rather than personal gain. The Jones-Crockett debate soon became recognized as a watershed moment in American political discourse, a turning point in how conspiracy theories were addressed in public forums. For years, politicians and media figures had attempted to counter conspiracy theorists with shouting matches and rhetorical combat. Crockett's methodical, evidence-driven approach demonstrated a more effective path, showing the power of thorough preparation and professional presentation in an age dominated by political theater. While Jones relied on volume and emotion, Crockett's calm delivery of documented facts resonated more deeply with viewers. Perhaps most importantly, the debate revealed that conspiracy theorists could be successfully challenged when their own words and actions were presented as evidence against them. In the months that followed, commentators coined the term the Crockett Standard, which came to represent the expectation that serious political figures should always be prepared to back their claims with documented evidence rather than emotional appeals or personal attacks. The debate was even incorporated into political science and communications courses as an example of effective advocacy and preparation. 6 months later, during a quiet congressional hearing, a colleague asked Crockett what she had learned from dismantling a prominent conspiracy theorist live on air. She answered simply, "I learned that truth is its own best advocate. You don't need to shout or attack. You just need to do your homework, present the facts clearly, and let people draw their own conclusions." The debate ultimately proved that in an era of rampant misinformation and conspiracy theories, the most powerful weapon remains what has always been: carefully researched, documented truth, presented with professionalism. For millions of Americans who watched a congresswoman dismantle a conspiracy theorist using nothing but his own words and her preparation, it served as a reminder that truth, when properly presented, is indeed its own best advocate. The nation witnessed what happens when preparation meets desperation, when evidence confronts emotion, and when competence goes head-to-head with profitable deception. The result was not even close, and it provided a roadmap for how to counter misinformation in a political age where truth itself has become a battleground.